unlike some of these other teams that were here, there, and everywhere, and their mind was, I guess, off on maybe Jupiter or something. They did the job. They did not listen to us saying, well, they don't have much of a shot to get in the show, and they executed perfectly. So be very curious to see how this extends to next year, if they take a more aggressive turn on it. You know that Tom Clausen wants to be back. You know Pippa Mann wants to be back. 16th is a good result, but I'm sure that's going to motivate him even more, maybe to unloosen the wheel just a little bit and maybe get a little more aggressive coming to 2020. But certainly a great debut for them, getting their program going and looking down the road. I don't think they're going to be, a full-time regular anytime soon, but a good performance for them. And I'd say also a good performance for Dragon Speed, another team that a lot of us didn't think was going to make the field. They also got in, again, at the expense of Carlin, but I think they've also shown an interesting thing in the future, so much so it looks like they are really scaling back their sports car program so that they can solely focus on IndyCar, whether that means they look for, maybe expansion, like a two-car team, bringing a more talented driver, a more experienced driver opposed to Ben Hanley. I don't know, but I think it says something that they're also committed for the long haul of the IndyCar series, at least in the next several years.
Colton Herta, is it too early to crown him Rookie of the Year 2019?
He got a raw deal. I don't think everybody can say that they were not heartbroken that he had the problem early, because I think he could have been a major factor in this race, and sadly, mechanical failure on lap 3 took it away from him. So I think that's probably the big heartbreak story. If there's anyone that really got a raw deal at the early part of the race, Colton Herta's name obviously is high on the list, certainly. I thought he was going to be a major factor throughout the day, and unfortunately he didn't get a chance to do that.
I really enjoy him, and I'm going to enjoy watching him full time. We're going to we're talking to Mathew Embury from WSBAT up in the South Pit. Matthew, you mentioned Robin Miller, reminding me of an article that I wrote over on Speedway Digest as well about it. But Robin Miller, recipient of the first annual award in his own honor, Robin Miller Award, which is to be awarded by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to journalists who go up and above and have basically a lifetime achievement award, not necessarily limited to journalists, but that's the focus point. And I have known Robin for so many years, and there's nobody more down to earth and more deserving than the award in his own name. But I tell you what, how awesome! I know you weren't up there in the media center with me when this happened, but this was on Friday morning of Carb Day. And Robin didn't even know what was happening. They didn't announce it. This was just a total surprise. But we saw Bobby Unser, Johnny Rutherford, AJ Foyt, and Mario Andretti come into the media center. We thought, well, okay, there's going to be a press conference of the old timers, and then Mark Miles got up and said, like, here's what we're doing, and we're going to give this award to Robin Miller. I tell you what, it gave me goosebumps to watch those guys talk about Robin Miller. I mean, how awesome. If you're going to have some people talk about how awesome you are, how about those guys telling you about how awesome? And Robin made a very good point. There was a lot of funny things that were said. It was kind of like a roasting in a lot of ways. But Robin said one thing, look around here, and he pointed to every one of those. When these guys are gone, they're gone. The old timers are gone. Robin Miller is part of that club. He's been around for so long. A lot of people don't know this. He raced a USAC. He was also an Indy car team member. Robin Miller has had as much of a contribution to IndyCar like AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, Johnny Rutherford, and Bobby Unser. What are your thoughts about Robin Miller?
Well, as you know, I'm not exactly on even keel with Robin Miller, but I certainly respect him as a media member. Certainly has his own say on certain things. Now, granted, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with him nor my colleague David Lamb, but decent job with covering the event for several years. Obviously, he was on the kart side, and agree to disagree, but you got to respect him for what he's done for the sport, certainly as far as a media member.
Right, and absolutely, that's my point. I mean, we could point to a lot of media people that we don't like their opinions, or we don't like or necessarily agree with what they say. But when you have somebody that can put that much passion of their life, that much life into the sport, yeah, hats off. All right, Detroit, here we are. The Bills of all right, I'll get it straight. Detroit Belle Isle, but. We're talking about Alexander Rossi. Alexander Rossi is pointed in the right direction. Let's talk about Detroit. Talk with us about the duels. Talk with us about the course. This is a street course, different than a road course, different than an oval course. Talk with us about the course up in Detroit.
Well, Detroit, it's a rough circuit. You got the manhole covers there, and then obviously the undulations. You got the bridge to run over that causes a lot of bumps. I mean, it is a physically demanding circuit, and it'll take its toll on these drivers after two races coming up today and tomorrow. So I tell you what, this is an event that you feel the pain the several days afterwards. So obviously, I think the drivers that are the longevity and can take the beating, I think are going to do real well. Obviously, Alexander Rossi, the Dugardens, the Dixons, the Powers, I think are going to be very competitive this weekend. And, of course, don't forget Graham Rahal swept both races a couple years ago, so I would assume his name's up there. And be interested to see what Ryan Hunter-Reay does. I think this has not necessarily been one of his favorite tracks, but he practiced well this morning, as did Spencer Pigot and James Hinchcliffe. So looking to qualifying here in about 20 minutes from now. Be very curious to see how the field lines up. It'll be very curious to see how Simon Pagenaud does, as he was only 10th overall in the time charts, looking ahead to qualifications coming up here in a few minutes.
Well, I'll tell you what, Will Power, Graham Rahal, all former Detroit winners, doing well in practice, and Will Power had one of the best laps yesterday at 109. Yeah, it feels weird. It feels like we're really slowing down, like we're only going interstate speed. They're only going 109 miles an hour compared to last week at 220 miles an hour. But, yeah, absolutely. So we got the duels. So talk with us about today's race. 1 o'clock coming up. NBC Sports Network. You can catch it up there in Detroit. What's in store? Walk us through the grid. Walk us through what we think is going to happen in qualifying. Walk us through Detroit GP.
3 p.m. is the actual start time of it, and it is on NBC today and tomorrow, not NBCSN.
I'm sorry. Thanks for that correction. Appreciate that.
So it is on national television, so everyone can watch it. Should be a very interesting race. Obviously, grid position, I think, is going to mean a lot unless you can go off sequence and maybe get a yellow to help you to flip things around. So I think the qualification, getting the Firestone past 6, I think is going to be paramount today and tomorrow if you're going to have a good result. And then we'll see what happens. But I'd say, like you said, if Will Power is right up there at the start, he could be very tough to beat because this is obviously his bread and butter. And he wants to bounce back from, obviously, a race to forget for him, even though the result was another top 10. But I wouldn't necessarily say that he was a factor for the victory at any point after that penalty he suffered early in the race last weekend.
So a lot of people don't understand the differences between a road course, a street course, and an oval. This is a street course. It's very obvious by the names of what they are, and that is that a street course is actual streets that are in a city or what have you that they've blocked off and created a track for. So Detroit, as you mentioned, kind of rough, and I know Penske's sunk a lot of money in there. Roger Penske's sunk a lot of money into that track and into that race, but it certainly is a true street course race. Talk with us about the obstacles, and if you're a crew chief and you're getting ready for the Detroit GP today, how is your strategy changing for the Detroit GP street course as opposed to, for example, last week with the Indianapolis 500 Oval?
Obviously, qualifying is going to be paramount. Obviously, you have the road course wing package with a lot more downforce to help you get through these tighter corners. But, yeah, like I said, it's a physically demanding circuit. I remember the old downtown circuit they ran until 91, between 89 and 91, and it was physically demanding. I remember Alitzer Jr. broke down 2 laps in And yet even after that, you could see him on the in-car camera, and he is going, I mean, it is a physically demanding layout, and I think Belle Isle's the same way. I mean, it will burn you out a lot more. There's not as many places where you could, take it easy a little bit like you can on one of these ovals like at Indy, Texas, or Pocono, and, loosen things up a little bit. You can't do that here. I mean, it's full action all the way around, and doing that for the entire distance, that certainly could take a lot out of you. And like I said, you will feel it days after this event is over with, especially not just one, but two races that to deal with this weekend.
Mathew Embury, WSVT up in South Bend, our official IndyCar contributor. Mathew, you got your griditology. Talk with us about how last week's race affected going into this week's race with the griditology, and where can people find the world-famous Mathew Embury's griditology?
Well, I'm already looking at the 2020, and right now, obviously, Pagano's name's going to be up there. I think the Penske names are going to be up there. Be very curious to see, like I said, with the new windscreen, how that affects aerodynamics and what teams, are able to maybe get some loopholes on that, maybe to get a little more speed out of the car, like what Penske did several years ago when they, tweaked with the side mirrors on the cars to get a little more pace out of their cars in 2006, 2007, so much so they actually had covers on the mirrors so other teams couldn't copy it. So be very curious to see how things play out, with the aerodynamics and that windscreen. Certainly, I think the power teams like Penske, maybe even ECR again, and I think Andretti, if Honda continues to gain ground, I think those teams are going to be right at the forefront. And, of course, then the question is, well, where does Ganassi fit into the puzzle? Because with, Chevrolet dominating, they have the Honda engine. They've been almost a non-factor, especially in qualifying. I mean, they almost went through the humiliation again of having one of their cars fail to make the main draw in the field with Felix Rosenqvist, so they qualified in 29th for the Indy 500.
Mathew, the Formula One Monaco race always bumps up against the Indianapolis 500. There was a driver that was not in either race, and it was disappointing to see that Fernando Alonso was not in the Indianapolis 500. But McLaren, I blame more than Alonso. McLaren, I think this was we saw one of the world's greatest drivers, and hopefully this does not affect the Indianapolis 500 as far as the international audience goes. But we did not see Fernando Alonso in Monaco or the Indianapolis 500. Let that sink in for a moment. Go ahead.
Well, like I said, last week or 2 weeks ago and last weekend, I said it, and I continue to stand by it. There was an extreme overconfidence and cockiness this McLaren team has shown since Zach Brown took over. They think they're better than they are, and I think it is shown when they struggled and they badmouthed Honda. Well, they said, well, it's all Honda's fault we couldn't get it done. Well, they're not getting it done with Renault engines this year either. So I think right now it's time maybe Zach Brown takes a little bit less of a controlling role in things. Pulls his nose out of the mix a little bit, maybe sees if someone else can get in control there and maybe get things righted, because ever since he has taken this program over with McLaren, their operations have looked pathetic. I mean, it's not just in Formula One, but in IndyCar, I mean, there was an overconfidence that was around them all week and all month long, and it showed. And by the time that they got to qualify and they realized, oh, no, we're in a little danger here, I don't think they knew how to react, and they panicked, and as a result, they're not in the field, and other teams got in at their expense.
Well, we got to wrap up the IndyCar talk. Mathew, real quickly, before we wrap it up, put a bow on it. Bring us up to speed. What are your thoughts, opinions, and what have you on IndyCar, where we're at, going through the month of May, Indianapolis 500. It feels weird not talking about it, but we have to move on to other races. So IndyCar as a season, as a whole, right now, give us your hot takes, sir.
Well, obviously, I think you'll see ECR drop back to their normal mode. That's why For instance, Spencer Piggott and Ed Jones could be challenging for qualifying or the Firestone Fast 6 today. I think you'll see the main players, like Ganassi will be a factor again.